The people who were trying to set up this whole technocracy, which is what I refer to in my book all the time, which is you have a small group of people who feel that they should rule the world, and they should line their pockets while doing so. Going back all the way to the 1940s, when the Ford Foundation and RAND were set up, there was a guy named Norman Dodd who at one point interviewed Gator, who was Rowan Gator, who was one of the founders of RAND, and he claimed that when he talked to Gator, Gator told him that their plan, Gator at the time was the president of the Ford Foundation, their plan was to, and I quote, to so alter life in the United States that we can be comfortably merged with the Soviet Union. Obviously, that didn't happen, but what did happen is something even better for the people who hold the reins of power, which is, they destroyed the Soviet Union, and now you have technocrats over there, you have technocrats over here, and it's a small group of people that are ruling the world. And that's where we're at.
All right, let me stop you, because this is the key. On the surface, they say they're fighting communism and collectivism, but really they're creating a corporate vertical integration system, and you're the only person to ever be allowed into their files. It's in your book. It's on record. We have the Ford Foundation documents that mirror what RAND was up to. Go over specifically the type of technocracy they talked about, same thing as Zbigniew Brzezinski wrote about in Between Two Ages. Then get into the world government, because you talked about you never believed in that. You thought it was a conspiracy theory. There you were in their own archives,
right,
seeing all of this and the type of world government they wanted to build.
Well, it's been there right from the beginning. I mean, another one of the the major figures in RAND, John Williams, who was a mathematician, who was like, I think, the third or fourth hire in RAND. He said we should go in and nuke the Soviets right now and take over and have a world government, the United States, then merge into a world government that will be controlled by the U.S., but the entire world will be under this government. And, time and again, there have been people at RAND and affiliated with RAND who have come up with this idea. The problem is that idea has been discredited in public. But yet, there's a lot of people who still believe in that because, again, they believe in what they call, the use of reason, and that, there's a small group of people who will tell everybody else what to do because they know better. And thus, we don't need elections. We don't need the voice of the people. We don't need anything like that because these guys, since they're scientists, or so they claim, they know what's best. And therefore, even today, if you go to the RAND Corporation, you say you have a problem, and you give them a question, they say, well, that may not be the question that you should be asking. Actually, this is the question that you should be asking. So they turn it around. So it has not changed at all. On the surface, it seems to. But underneath, you still have these same drives for a small group of technocrats to be ruling the world. And, obviously, they went hand in hand with the Ford Foundation. The Ford Foundation used to go around, giving cover to CIA operations throughout the world. And, they even set up something called, I don't know if you're aware of this, something called Area 5 of the Ford Foundation, which is dealt with behavioral sciences in the 1950s. And what they were trying to do, basically, is, again, change the way that people think and intervene in foreign governments. And, they provided cover for, the coups that happened in Burma at the time, the Philippines, Peru, Iran, even Italy. I mean, these are things that have happened, and they continue to happen to this very day.
Now, this is so important. Let's talk about Area 5. Let's talk about the type of world government they wanted to build. It has been discredited because patriots have been fighting it for more than 60 years. But now we do have a corporate global governance run by the banks, right, who bankrupted our society by design and are now offering a global government run by them through the financial system to save us from the financial crisis they created. And it's the same thing with the pension funds.
Again, because it's a kind of spurious freedom, what they offer us. I mean, that's what I was referring to at the beginning of our conversation. In that, they say that we're consumers. But, I mean, look, there's nothing wrong with buying things that you like, with enjoying life. But when that is the end-all and be-all of your life, when the way that the government sees you is just a mindless sucker who's going to go out and buy the latest the model of whatever it is, or, the cheapest T-shirts from China, we have a problem because we're not being taken into consideration as citizens.
I mean, what they're doing is, and this goes back to Edward Bernays before the RAND Corporation,
right,
is they take away things like family, property, local control. They make you not value that, so you sell your soul for some wampum, kind of like the New York Indians 300 years ago, selling New York and Long Island for one bucket of glass beads, you know, that basically cost $1 silver at the time.
Absolutely.
And so it's, we'll give you iPhones, we'll give you NFL, we'll give you UT football. We'll make those people, we'll make Michael Jordan the hero, not Mahatma Gandhi, not Jesus, you know, not Martin Luther King, not George Washington. We will you know, turn you into creatures who are basically me, 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 me.
Exactly.
So everybody's me, 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 me. And then nobody will stand up for anybody else because we've been psychologically and culturally atomized.
Exactly. That's exactly, and that is the main sin of the Rand Corporation. They introduced this kind of thinking into the world. They systematized it, formalized it, and thus gave us the foundation for this incredible transformation in the entire world. That's why I say that we're all Rand's bastard children, because it started in the late 1970s and early 80s, but especially under Reagan, who was, again, another creature of the military-industrial complex, who came in and said, well, in the name of freedom, we're going to deregulate everything because everything is better if it's deregulated, which means basically it's like, hey, the corporations can do whatever they want because there's no restraints on them. And, you know, we all saw what happened. We all saw what happened with, you know, when they repealed the Glass-Steagall Act, you know, all these millions of foreclosures that we're going through, the whole financial collapse.
Because it's not free market. It allows them who control the government rules to selectively steal and thieve. Now they've got us communalized. Now they've got us in a consumer collectivism. So they say, if you don't want the system to die, that you're now basically a Siamese twin of, connected to, you've got to give into our next phase.
Absolutely. I completely agree. And this is all done deliberately. You know, I mean, and people have to be aware of this, so then they will be able to put an end to this, to begin to try to put an end to this, because I think it can still be stopped. I mean, you know, I don't think that apocalypse is around the corner, although we're creeping closer every day. But I think we can still stop it. But people first have to be informed, and that's one of the things that I try to, you know, that I try to point out in my book.
Continue.
And basically, you know, I mean, that's where we are right now. I mean, they continue doing this kind of thing. They keep on feeding us. It's like bread and circuses. Remember, you know, the Roman times. You know, it's like we're going to have all these things, and you're going to have all these sweet little products. And in the meantime, don't think too much about who is going to go into office, whether there's really any difference between the Democratic and the Republican Party, whether even if you have a little group of people who finally think, oh, maybe we should do something about this, but then begin to be co-opted immediately by larger forces behind them, such as the Tea Party. I mean, it's all of a piece, and you know, we have to stand up for our rights. We have to tell people, no, this cannot be.
You're absolutely right. Overall, did you get into any of the newer Rand Corporation documents? Because they're charting the police state takeover, the naked body scanners, the federalization of local police. They admit they're charting this nightmare system. Long before the terror attacks came, they said, we're putting this in place. The terror attacks are coming, because another arm of the system staged the attacks. Of course, they knew it. And we're going to take control of society this way. And in the next phase, and they're already doing it with most of the you know, tuitions being paid for, the scholarships are now about data mining, spying, prison guards, surveillance. They are shifting the economy over to one purely run by the military-industrial complex, where you can't get a job unless it's working for them. That's right. That's right. Or unless you pass their clearance. I mean, it's absurd. It's totally absurd. And one of the things that really bugs me about this kind of thing is, like, for instance, you know, it's like even when you're applying for a job, people want to see your credit record. And I go, well, what does that have anything to do? What does that have to do with the fact of whether you can do your job, whether you can, you know, whether you qualify for this? No, they want to see whether you're a true consumer and whether you have paid your debts. In other words, again, you're being viewed just as a consumer instead of a professional or a citizen. And that's the kind of thing that I think is intolerable. Alex Abella is our guest. AlexAbella.com is the website. Abella spelled A-B-E-L-L-A. The best-selling book is Soldiers of Reason, the Rand Corporation and the American Empire. You can get it anywhere where better books are sold, or Amazon.com. We're going to go back to Alex, but I want to condense this down, okay? I've read Propaganda. That's the name of the book by Edward Bernays. I've read his other writings. I've read British Ministry of Defense reports. I've read the released and declassified information out of British think tanks that have developed very similar situations, and it was brought to a high science by the 60s. They had these systems back in the 30s, and they weaponized culture with sex and glitz. You know, I don't defend a lot of the oppressive things going on in some Muslim nations, but they can recognize this is an alien, weaponized culture meant to get our children, our women, break up our families to make us more easily controlled. And that's why they're the big enemy of the globalists, because they're not, you know, they're 1 billion, 100 million people, and most of them aren't going along with it. Now, if you go back to Joseph McCarthy, he was a good guy. He meant well. He had some problems. Nobody's perfect. He was worried about communist infiltration. He knew about Stalin killing millions and millions of people in Ukraine alone. And the media used him to set up hysteria to get the Rand Corporation and the Pentagon more power, but it's been declassified the whole time. They've been funding the Soviets from before World War II. They've been funding them, and the British have been funding them in 1917. It's also been declassified that Mao was put into power by the CIA. David Rockefeller in 1973 wrote about it in the New York Times and said how great Mao Zedong was. I read those quotes last week. It's in my film Endgame. So they used the threat of the Soviets and, you know, locking up janitors and file clerks, you know, that worked at the FBI or whatever, saying they were commies, because they were going to communist meetings. They believed this is how you empowered the people. They were useful idiots, as Lenin would call them. He was very useful, and they loved him. The minute he found out, well, wait, there's think tanks funding this, Ford Foundation, the Army wants to merge us with the Soviet Union, because this was all being written up at the time by Rand in the 50s. These are now public. He freaked out and came out and said the Army's running communism. Well, yeah, the Army set up the UN at Presidio. They have to control both sides to create the synthesis. And then he was politically destroyed, and they got him up before Congress and said, you think the Army runs the commies? And it was over for Joseph McCarthy. He wasn't useful. Alex Abella, getting into merging us with the Soviet Union and the Rand Corporation documents. We're about to go to break. Sorry, this is a short segment, but what's your take on what I just talked about?
I think you're absolutely correct. I mean, I think that, you know, McCarthy pointed out the danger of, you know, this kind of communist infiltration, which at the time a lot of liberals thought that's not true, but actually has been proven that, yes, there was a lot of communist infiltration in this country, whether they would have been...
That's right. The Soviets opened the files. He was absolutely...
Yes, he was correct. He was correct. I mean, you know, the way in which he went about it, perhaps, you know, could have been better, but he was on the right track. Unfortunately, you know, he was also an alcoholic, and that was his problem. The way in which he presented things, in which he went off the cuff, you know, destroyed the content, the useful content of what.
But you notice he got destroyed, though, when he pointed out that our own government wanted a form of collectivism.
Right, exactly. But on the other hand, it was true. A lot of people in the government did think like that. He says, yes, they thought that was the way of the world. You have to remember one thing. In the late 1940s, a lot of people thought that there was no future for capitalism. It's hard for us to conceive of that because the Soviet Union went down in flames in the 1980s. But in the late 1940s, they were saying that. Everybody was saying that. There is no future for capitalism. The Soviets and the commies are going to win. And, you know, when you get into that kind of mindset and you start, again, politicizing culture, which is, you know, what happens with that, that is a great danger to any society. And that's what McCarthy was trying to point out.
All right, Alex, back in 70 seconds. We have a lot of breaks at the end and start of the hour.